Sunborn commence. Would the counsel for the prosecution like to step forward and make some opening remarks?
I am a newcomer to Merc Bottom. I have enjoyed spending time with you all here. But the events that have come to pass have cast a shadow over my eyes, and it is my humble and disliked duty that we have to prosecute Lord Gideon for the events that have transpired. The charges are extensive and severe. Despite advertising wealth and prosperity that came from a dungeon, we actually found that he aided in the release of the demon Lilith. He incited violence in the barony of Merkbottom. He destroyed sacred ground and killed innocent monsters that were protected by our god Carneus. He cursed the members of the House of the Eclipse. He bribed and manipulated 2 households of the park. He tried to break the spell that keeps Amtgardia's cycle of life and death in balance. He betrayed his fellow Merkbottomites. He desecrated the wilds, and I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Robin. Would the counsel for the defense like to step forward and make some remarks?
Hello, everyone. I'm Moss.
Hi, Moss.
Hi, Moss.
So, I'm here today for the defense of Lord Gideon, Sunborn, Esquire, etc. Is he a bad guy sometimes? Yes. Was he a bit of a tyrant? A little bit. But did he do anything illegal? I don't really think so. So I'm here to show today that at the very least, the things he has been accused of are not illegal. We don't have laws. So I will prove without a doubt that he is mostly not guilty.
Thank you, Lord Moss. Lord Gideon, in response to the charges presented, how do you plead?
Not guilty.
Would the prosecution like to call forth their first witness?
Prosecution calls Lord Gundro Rastvard. How do you say it?
Rastvard.
Rastvard.
There's more S's in there.
I'm just going to use this chair. I'm claiming this as the witness bench.
Okay.
Very well.
Would you please give a summary of the events that transpired in the dungeon?
In the dungeon?
Yes.
Well, I fought a lot of monsters, disabled some traps. Can you be more specific?
Yeah. Is it not true that you took on the visage of the Dark Lord?
Objection. Leading witness.
Overruled. Answer the question.
No, that is not true. I did not take on the visage of the Dark Lord.
Were you controlled by any dark entity?
No. I simply am the Dark Lord. I did not take on the visage of anything.
Okay. I do have a question.
Yes.
Right after your trial, where you were prosecuted as guilty, why did you aid Lord Gideon on coronation?
I don't
Objection.
know exactly
Relevance.
what you mean. And
Overruled.
Actually-
Answer the question.
Objection. That is a very leading question.
yeah, I don't know what you mean.
Overruled. There are no laws.
There are no laws. You can say there are no laws.
So, if there are no laws,
I'll just be over here, I guess.
Lord Gundro?
So you asked why I aided Lord Gideon, but I don't know what you mean.
On the day of coronation during the Eclipse War, you were seen alongside Gideon when he transformed into a deva. Were you or were you not there, or was that another entity?
On coronation?
Yeah, on coronation.
I don't know how exactly you think I was helping him. I distinctly remember resurrecting members of Murkbottom. As a matter of fact, I resurrect the prosecutor for, the counsel for prosecution.
That is fair.
And
Thank you for
so
clarifying.
How exactly?
What is your opinion on Gideon's actions on that day?
I think he's had a little fun.
A lot of fun? That's
Yeah.
fair. Would you say that he's more evil than you?
No,
No? Okay.
no, I'm a necromancer.
Weird that a necromancer would help so many people, though.
Well,
Objection. That's not a question.
Sustained.
All right.
Alright. How many names were in the book?
I believe the count was 37. I only saw the book like twice, and I was not the one recording names.
And you were conducting research into the book? What was your research on?
I was not conducting research into the book.
Okay. What were you doing within the depths of the dungeon?
I was conducting research on my own immortality.
Okay. So is your immortality separate from Gideon's immortality goals?
Objection. How is this relevant?
Overruled. It speaks to the character.
I don't know that our immortalities are linked intrinsically. I'm trying to.
Not intrinsically linked. I'm more of the how is your research at all intrinsically that like okay to rephrase was your
Objection.
research
Interrupting the witness.
was your research related to what Gideon was doing?
Only in a tertiary manner.
Okay. So it wasn't your goal in the end. It wasn't your goal in the end to end immortality.
No. My goal was to secure my own immortality in a more thorough manner.
Okay. Just getting an idea of what you were doing down in the dungeons, more seeing what was happening.
I have no secrets.
Yeah.
I was doing research on the Soul Stone and the Sunstone so that I might create a phylactery.
Okay.
In your opinion, did Gideon's actions reveal an intent to disrupt the life cycle in Murkbottom, in Amtgardia?
I just passed him my notes. He requested that I do some research into the stone, which I was happy to do because it furthered my goals. And when I was finished with my research, I passed him the notes. I never really cared what his goals were. However, I do stand by what I have said many times, that he was absolutely a tyrant. But there have been many tyrannical rulers throughout Amtgardia, and most of them are celebrated for it.
Did you find your trial to be fair and just?
No, absolutely not.
Objection.
So
Irrelevant.
No, this pushes forward what Gundro was saying earlier, where Gundro said that he's a tyrant, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Relevance to the kingdom is stability of rulership and justiceness of their decrees. If Gideon is seen as a tyrant,
Lord Gideon, we will uphold decorum in this court.
yes, Baron, Lord Gideon, if he is seen as a tyrant, that gives his citizens every reason to rebel, which
Yes, but that does not matter on Lord Gideon's crimes that he's being accused of in this court.
inciting violence was one of his charges.
That is a tyrannical ruler's one of the key characters of a tyrannical ruler.
Counsel, you were arguing with each other
I was
and
gonna
request
say-
that you stick to asking
Yeah.
questions of your witness.
I was about
Focus
to
on
throw
the
out
witness.
an objection. Yeah.
Yeah.
Objection on the center of attention right now.
Yes, you are.
Sustained.
So, anything else you got for me?
What were the nature of the stones, to your best recollection?
So one of them was the vessel for the demon Lilith's soul energy. It's
Will.
difficult to.
Will's a good word for it.
It's kind of difficult to pinpoint. And the sunstone seemed to be more of a receptacle for the soul energy, something of that nature, from someone that is more of this plane, less demonic, less angelic.
Understood. And you have no clear idea of who this entity might have been associated with the Sunstone.
When I received it, it was an empty vessel.
Interesting.
And that was one of the reasons why I was so interested in it, because being an empty vessel, it helped to further my research into creating vessels, well, a vessel for my own soul.
Indeed. And so you don't know what entity what ended up being stored in the Sunstone.
Well, I mean, we all watched it. It was Lord Gideon's immortality. We all watched what... We were there. Everyone saw that.
Thank you, Gideon. Thank you, Lord Gundro.
So, Lord Gundro, I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
Do you remember the day that we were all a group of smugglers paid by Lord Gideon?
Yeah.
Do you remember who was in that group? Not all of us. I can claim one of them.
Me, you, Lilica, Ducky maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there was one or two more. I don't know. I've slept since then.
So you remember that we were paid by Lord Gideon then to retrieve an item, right?
Yes.
You remember said item?
Yeah.
What was that item?
It was an acorn, well, a basket in the shape of an acorn.
What was inside the basket of the acorn?
To my recollection, a bag?
A bag containing...
Couldn't tell you.
You could tell me because you did show me. Or at least you told me.
Objection,
Objection.
argumentative.
Sustained.
I couldn't tell you what was in the bag, as I never actually opened the bag.
That is fair. That's fair. You never opened the bag. It was Lilica who opened the bag, correct?
I
Yeah.
couldn't tell you. I know that legitimately, I don't think anybody opened the bag that day.
Okay. Good to know. But you do remember that we did get paid that day, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And you remember running into a second group
Mm-hmm.
who also had members. Do you remember those members?
It's Scander, Nemo, some other people.
Would you say it is likely that they were also
Victor was
rewarded
in
for
there.
some services?
I don't believe that they got paid, no.
They didn't. You don't believe so. But do you think they were hired by Lord Gideon?
Potentially.
This is meandering testimony.
Yeah.
Yes, I was hired by Lord Gideon to do this service. Get
So-
to your point, Counsel.
That's
Thank you.
related to one of two charges. One of the, well, not two charges, but one of the charges, which is Lord Gideon manipulating two groups to fight each other. Because you were, Lord Baron, if I may ask, were you told to get something similar, an acorn basket?
Objection. He is not one of the witnesses on the stand currently.
Well, I can call him up further up then.
Sustained. And I will not take the stand today.
Okay. I can ask Regent Tana later then.
Myrtle?
So, I believe that would be the end unless you want to add anything to...
I'm done with Lord Gundro's testimony for now.
Thank you, Counsel. Counsel for the defense, would you like to ask Lord Gundry any questions?
Yes.
Ooh, cross-examination.
Hi.
I'm sorry, I'll keep the decorum about it. Hey.
So, Lord Gundro, I just have a few questions.
Okay.
Firstly, you have already stated that the trial that Lord Gideon held was unfair.
Well, yeah.
However, I would like to ask, on the charges of theft, were you not guilty?
The court determined that I was guilty.
Have you committed theft in Murkbottom before that trial was held?
I'm not on trial here. I plead the fifth.
There is no Fifth Amendment here.
In that case,
And you, to be clear, a trial was already held, so you cannot be retried on any charges of theft
that occurred
previous to the trial.
previous to the trial, indeed. Speaking of which, has anybody seen the Baroque Treasury?
The baronial
What's that look
treasury
like?
is gone missing.
Just in case that helps
tell
you
me.
answer the question.
I will state again, the court found me guilty.
That's not a denial of theft, however.
Any other questions? Or?
Yes. So as the defense asked a lot of questions that seem to be kind of irrelevant,
Objection. Defense is being a meanie.
Overruled.
Well, I don't have all day here.
Overruled. I'm catching Moss's 5.
So they did make a point. One of the things that Gideon is on trial for is the releasing of Lilith. Were you the main instigator of freeing, I suppose technically your wife, Lilith, from the confinements that she was in?
That's
Objection, I'm not his wife.
Let's scratch that from the record then. This demon that inhabits your wife, who I think you would like to also be your wife. But that's conjecture.
anyway. So that's really complicated. I don't know that I would say I specifically instigated or was one of the main instigators. However, releasing Lilith was still, it ended up being necessary to complete my research.
Okay.
So that, I will say that was not a goal of mine.
But you could say that the release of Lilith did help, or was to help, your own personal research into immortality.
Yeah, that was a decision that I ended up making in order to further my research.
All right. Thank you. I'm just gonna make sure here that's not another question for you.
So what is this?
Any further questions, defense counsel?
One other. On the charge of suicide and violence, this is just a general question. Would you say that Merc Bottom, as a whole, is a fairly violent place?
Well, yeah. Incredibly. We went out and killed each other today, right before this. For fun.
There was one other thing, and you are one of multiple people who did go into the dungeon and slaughter inhabitants of the dungeon, correct?
I don't know that I killed a single entity within the dungeon.
That's fair. Were you witness to others killing entities within the dungeon?
Oh yeah.
Lots of them?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
However, as I said, I do not believe that I personally killed a single entity within the dungeon.
That's fair. All right. Thank you very much for your testimony. I'm good.
Your release from the stand. Thank you, Lord Gundrill. All right, prosecution, would you like to call your next witness?
Do I have to step
So-
up when you get in?
I would like to call the monster that lived in the dungeon that I taught a Spear of Annihilation to the stand.
What's this entity's name for the record?
Yes.
Orthol.
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 Okay.
Nice to meet you, Orthol.
Could you spell that for the record, please?
O-R. That's.
Also nice to meet you again. How you doing since then?
Dead.
Dead? At least you came back, right?
Yes.
That's good. Unlike your friends, though, right?
All dead. All dead.
Because you see, all your friends are dead, right?
Are you my friend?
Objection. I
No.
think he established that already.
Yeah, yeah. What I'm saying is, when did your friends die?
Oh, well, during class, a group of strange people came in, and started throwing weapons and magic.
That's right, that's right. Was there someone leading this group into the dungeon that you remember opening a door?
Many. There were some classes I wasn't present for.
Yeah. Would you say that a man dressed in purple and white was opening the door?
Oh yeah, I saw that guy. Yeah.
Yeah. Point out the man who opened the door.
Was that Matt? Right
Are
there.
you pointing to him or him?
Well, it was also, I think that man in the back opened one of the stores. There were more.
That's okay. All good. But you clearly remember at least Lord Gideon opening the door.
Yes.
Yes. Good. So then you would say that he was one of the few that led, or one of the few consistent factors that led many adventurers to come in and kill some of your classmates, right? And teachers.
Yes. Yeah.
And you were living peacefully in those dungeons, weren't you?
Not really. No, we were killing a lot of people.
That is fair. Was that peaceful to you?
Yeah, just was. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
That's awesome.
See, that's normal life for you, but then we come in and destroy everything, don't we? Now you don't have friends.
Objection, leading the witness.
Sustained.
Was your life hurt by adventurers coming into the dungeon?
Was your life hurt by adventurers coming into the dungeon?
Well, I suppose that's subjective now.
Yeah.
Because I didn't die, but and I learned magic, which is what I was in school for. But my friends did die, and I think that makes me feel things.
Right. And so we destroyed the natural order of your life. Yeah.
Is that what magic does?
Magic can do that sometimes, and I'm so sorry for that, buddy.
That's okay. Only smart people can use magic, and I can use magic.
Exactly, you're very smart. And
Objection,
so-
irrelevant.
Sustained.
So, I would say this, under Cornelius' eye, you don't have to know who Cornelius this is, but this is a disturbance of the natural order and destroying and killing innocent monster lives. You know, you will never see those friends again, right?
Unless I learn magic to see them again.
Exactly. You'll never see them.
Oh.
Objection.
Making the witness sad.
Sustained.
Sorry. You can learn magic to bring them back, but for now you can't bring them back, sadly.
Objection, not a question.
If the monster's really sad, he will cry. Right now. Cry, monster! Okay.
Well, Warthog, that's sort of the end of what I had for you. I just really wanted to know if your home was destroyed and all that, so thank you for answering truthfully and honestly. And obviously pointing out the person who led a group of adventurers there and opened those doors to kill your teachers and your friends.
Thank you, counsel. Defense, would you like to ask the witness any questions?
Sure.
Oh, and then some letters. Please stay seated.
Orthog, was it?
Orthog, yes.
Right. So Orthog, you're living in a dungeon, correct?
Yes. Right. Love more space.
All right. Living in the dungeon with other monsters, it gets pretty violent in there, you said, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Would other adventurers, other people from outside the dungeon, entering your dungeon and killing people, is that outside of the natural things that would have happened in your dungeon?
Objection, speculation.
Overruled. Finish your
Answer
question,
the
counsel.
I'm asking him, is that something that would have happened anyway, or is this completely different?
Well, so first time it's happened to me. I can't say for the past.
Okay. Do you have any valuables in your dungeon?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
I had rocks and shiny rocks, and then there were yellow rocks, and my mom gave me as much money.
Okay.
And they took those.
Okay, so the adventurers that came into your dungeon took those.
Not mine. Not mine. No, I kept mine.
Very good. But they took those from other creatures that were in the dungeon? Okay. No further questions this time. I'll have my co-counsel.
So, a question, just a sort of general question. The people who lived in the dungeon with you, your friends, and I'm sure they weren't all your friends. I'm sure there was at least some you didn't get along with. Was there violence against each other frequently?
Yes. Miss Cinders, wise fire giant. He was teaching us magic. He would use magic to teach us how to kill.
Okay. And as a general question, I don't know that you would, but some of the people you knew, if given the opportunity to leave the dungeon and do violent acts, do you think they would take those opportunities?
Depends, is it scary out there?
Do you think it's scary here?
Well, everyone's been nice.
Defensive counsel, could you please speak up so the jurors can hear you?
Oh, excuse me.
Thank you.
Well, everyone's been nice.
So, given that environment, do you think you knew other monsters in the dungeon who would want to come up here and take some of our shiny things with violence?
Probably. We like shiny things quite a lot.
Okay. And then, currently are you living in a new dungeon since the previous one has been destroyed?
Yes. Yes. Well, it kind of changes day to day. Everyone's a little environment. So.
Okay, okay. Let me just check my notes real quick. And then it does sound like we have established that while you do recognize Lord Gideon as someone who existed within the dungeon, you do also recognize a lot of us here before you, correct? As people who entered the dungeon and potentially killed some of your friends and comrades?
Yes. Yes. There was also some that joined all of us together and became new teacher soon.
Right, but a lot of those people you see around you right now did enter the dungeon, killed people you knew, and took their shiny rocks.
Yes.
Alright, no further questions.
Thank you, Orthog. You may leave the stand.
You leave it up
Oh
there.
no! Oh no! Okay. No.
Teachers got you. Yeah, go over there.
All right, counsel, would you like to call your next witness? Can I get a time check, please?
26 minutes.
Very well. Counsel, we have apportioned about another 25 minutes for this trial at the maximum so that all counsel and jurors are aware.
Alright, do you want to start?
Sure. Lady Tana Mertz, thank you for coming to the stand. Would you give a brief summary of your experience in the dungeon?
My experience in the dungeon was largely informational, using the spell Capture. I would oftentimes sit back in the comfort of my own home while venturing forth mentally to bring forth pictures and images and videos, memories, so that all of Merkbottom could enjoy it. So while I did not actively participate, I did relay the events and going-ons quite frequently. I did not participate in the dungeon whatsoever until the very last day that we had the dungeon, or I guess the next to last day we had the dungeon, I suppose.
So you would consider, would you say that you witnessed a great deal that occurred in the dungeon, even if you didn't yourself participate in it directly?
Yes, I did witness a great deal.
Cool. Did you, would you please give a summary of the events that you, as you saw them?
Certainly. Generally there was puzzles in order to enter the dungeon. Once in the dungeon, like we often witness on a day-to-day basis, there were generally monsters. Most of them were very aggressive that would come forth and begin attacking several members of Merkbottom. And oftentimes it did lead to violence, but it seemed to be mostly on both sides that wanted to kill one another.
Very good. Would you say that this violence occurred prior to the dungeon opening?
I mean, we have constantly been plagued with swamp monsters. No offense, Moss. Throughout our history of Merkbottom, there have been monsters. They usually come and start killing before we can inquire where they came from first. So who knows if they did indeed come from the dungeon beforehand? It's very unclear. They sometimes don't want to talk very much. But for at least the last 2 to 3 years that I have been here, we often do encounter some very violent monsters that come after our lives.
When you, were you here on the day that the dungeon first opened?
Yes, I do believe I was. It was when the Baron, at the time, Lord Gideon was petrified, and I believe Abeja was the one who initially healed him. He stated that he had seen some sort of monster that petrified him, and there was something about a book.
Did you see the dungeon door prior to its opening?
I technically saw it before they, like, in a few moments before they figured out how to open the door, but I hadn't seen the door before I was watching other people seeing the door.
Mm-hmm. That's fine. Who opened the door initially?
I would have to go back and look at my records. I know that Lord Gideon showed people the door, but I believe it was the first adventuring party who went through the door who actually opened the door. It may have been Abeha and Atticus's group, I suppose. Could have been. It could have been Z's group. I'm not certain, but I do know it was a group, and it was not Lord Gideon who initially opened the door.
Okay. How was the door open?
I believe there was a blood sacrifice, or it could have been Gundro and I don't know. There were many groups that went through the dungeon, but yes, there was a sacrifice of blood in order to get
Okay.
through the door.
And who figured that out?
The first adventuring group to go through.
Okay.
I have a few
Yep.
questions. Lady Ponomerx, I have a couple questions. You said your first foray into the dungeon was actually in the end, right?
Yes, correct.
I believe that is not the case because you, Gideon, and Baron Expander did go into the dungeon to retrieve the skull before that.
Objection.
Not a question.
That will lead into a question. Did you not remember that?
I believe I scribed, but I do not know if I was physically present for that event.
Objection argumentative.
Council will remember that our memories were tampered with at the time.
Right, and that will lead me to my second question. What of those what did you remember after the double eclipse seal was broken?
I recalled Gideon,
Lord Gideon.
Lord Gideon, Sunborn, Esquire, titles. His behavior changing very, very suddenly after sealing away the demon Lilith. He used to be a stand-up person, always fighting for Murkbottom. But then after sealing away the demon Lilith and having the demon Lilith's stone in his possession, his movements and behaviors became less certain. He was not quite in his right mind as he led those meetings. I do remember that there were several people who did speak up against Lord Gideon. Why would he seal away all of the memories if not to discourage people who were in discord?
Correct. And would you say that's elements of tyrannical rule?
Perhaps. But I also have seen Lord Gideon, and for the first 75% of the time that I knew him, before under the influence of Lilith, he was not tyrannical whatsoever.
Who we're trying here today is the Gideon from that reign. So I want to ask, since you were at the Eclipse War and you have such loyalty for Gideon, why did you not join Gideon?
Lord Gideon.
Lord Gideon in that moment.
Well, because ultimately I fight for the people of Murkbottom, and the people of Murkbottom were by a slight majority, but by a majority against Lord Gideon. This issue of immortality goes very back into before I came to Antgardia, so I still have some conflicting feelings on it myself. But given that there was a clear majority opposed to Gideon, I chose to stay with the people and oppose Lord Gideon.
Why are people against Gideon?
Lord Gideon.
Lord Gideon.
Counsel and witness, I will not remind you again. You will uphold the decorum of this court, or I will make you both leave the stand.
Lord Gideon, Sunborn Esquire. I do not believe that people were specifically against Lord Gideon, but rather there were mostly conflicts on how people felt about immortality. Given that we do not know what happens after death for certain, given that we do experience life and death in these cycles and experience it differently for everyone, and also given the fact that for some people immortality is a blessing, while others find it to be a curse that is a burden too hard to bear.
So if you stand for the majority of Merc Bottom, as you say, then do you believe that the majority of Merc Bottom agrees that you should not attempt to break that cycle? You do stand with that?
A slight majority, yes, I do agree, yes.
Yes. Thank you. I wanted to confirm that. There's something else that I wanted to confirm, Lady Hana. Using your capture spell, I remember this statement specifically from Amalda when it came to my adventuring party, but there was a door that glittered like stars in space. Is that reminiscent of any House of Eclipse magic?
Stars in space are very common in mythology. We have Nissalune, and we have the 14 gods also are stars in space.
Yeah.
While it is House of the Eclipse, I don't feel like that's conclusive whatsoever. The patterns were not the House of the Eclipse symbol. In fact, I don't believe stars even show up in the House of the Eclipse symbol specifically.
I wanted to confirm. That was something that we noticed back then. If my counsel would like to add anything else.
I'm good, thank you.
Defense, would you like to ask any questions?
Yes, thank you. Hello, Lady Hana. Hello. So, what I'd like to say. Sorry.
Might I provide a correction?
Yes.
I had said it was a sun magic that I was not familiar with.
Sign that.
Thank you for bringing that point to clarity.
Lady Hana, you said you noticed a change in Lord Gideon after the Demon Lilith was sealed and he started carrying the stone with him, correct?
Correct.
Do you, in your opinion, believe that may have something to do with his change to a more tyrannical sort of baron?
Absolutely. I do believe it was the Demon Lilith's influence who overcame Lord Gideon. While his actions may have been unjust, I do not think it is fair to necessarily judge an immortal for not being able to overcome such a widespread influence of a demon that brought such destruction throughout her previous mortality, or
So,
immortality.
also in your opinion, do you believe that Lord Gideon would do these same sorts of things if he was in his right mind?
I do not believe so. The history of his character would speak otherwise. I would caution any person, Hark or otherwise, from having prolonged contact with that stone, despite the necessity of keeping it safe.
Thank you. And then, again, an opinion question. In regards to the suppressing of the memories of various House of the Eclipse members, do you believe that is something that should be punished in this court of Merkbottom? Do you think it is a punishable offense?
I believe that it is something that should be considered with all of the other factors as a whole. However, I believe you made the point that we don't have laws. So I'm unclear on that. I would have to read to see what our non-existent existing laws are. Maybe we should have those.
I'm going to be working on
I don't
Just in
know.
your opinion, do you
I
think
do
he
wonder
should face
though.
punishment for it? Just not on a legal standpoint, just on a...
I think a punishment is due, but I do believe the influence of the demon needs to be weighted.
Excuse me.
It does bring the question though, if he tampered with our memories, were his memories also tampered with?
That is a very excellent point that the witness stated of her own volition. So, my co-counsel brought up a good point. During the sealing of the Demon Lilith, many of us were there. Several of us took part in the ritual. I was not one of those. During that sealing ritual, did any issues come up?
Well, I do believe there was a slight misspeak that Azul may have had while sealing the stone. We thought that all went perfectly, but we just hoped because she was no longer here that it all went out without a hitch. But I do believe there was a slight misspeak in the saying of that during the sealing.
So it's very possible that the stone did not actually fully contain and seal her power due to the ritual not being completed correctly.
That is accurate, yes. We hoped against hope it had, but magic.
So as stated by this witness, the sealing of Lilith was very likely not complete, and it is likely that Lilith's influence was having an effect on Lord Gideon.
Counsel, is that a question or are you testifying?
You're right.
I'll remind all counsel that we are on a time constraint. You have 10 minutes to finish questioning witnesses. Then the jurors will have 5 minutes to deliberate. We'll make some closing remarks, and then I'll pass sentence.
But I do believe that is everything I have to. Thank you very much.
Me too.
I was done.
Thank you, Lady Tana.
Lady Tana, before you rise, I've got 2 questions.
Oh, then my co-counsel.
Oh, pardon me, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
I have just a couple questions. As one who witnessed most things happen in the dungeon, would you say that the monsters in the dungeon were immediately hostile, or were they more sapient?
Occasionally they were sapient. I think that, was it called? Not Olrock? He's asleep anyway. I believe his group, some were able to negotiate with. However, the majority were swinging first and asking questions later.
And of the groups that were able to be negotiated with, did the adventurers that go through the dungeon attempt negotiation more often than not?
Some parties did, some parties didn't. Lord Gideon was generally not in the room for those negotiations or non-negotiations.
Fair enough.
In fact, he mostly remained outside of the dungeon.
And the dungeon, the aforementioned loot that the monster that testified before you, did the adventurers loot this dungeon as they're going through it of the valuables?
Yes.
Okay. So you would say that this is normal behavior for adventurers, or is this bizarre behavior led on by some tyrannical government?
Most adventurers I know generally kill and loot the bodies. We were started by a mercenary company, so it's kind of in the founding of our part.
Okay. Another line of questioning: how familiar are you with the scriptures of our Lord Cornelius?
I am continuing to try to become more and more familiar with Cornelius and 14. I'm not as well versed as Autumn is, of course.
Unfortunately, yeah, one of our more important witnesses cannot be here, but were you ever able to listen to some of her sermons?
Yes, I did. I was able to listen in a little bit.
We're the jury court. That's what we're trying this for. So, would you, with your knowledge of Cornelius, say that, what is your view of Cornelius's opinion on immortality and how it relates to the wilds of the world?
I'm not certain entirely that is necessarily Cornelius's explicit domain. Out of the 14, I also believe there is some revolution of life and death and strong eating the weak, and there are wild things and there are those who seek to conquer the wild things. It all appears to be part of the cycle that we have here.
May I request a time check?
No further questions.
Yes, you have 5 minutes and 25 seconds to continue questioning witnesses.
Okay, I've got one last question for Tana. Okay. Lady Tana, if I were to train a dog to attack any person that it saw, would I be guilty of inflicting harm?
But I do not believe that people are dogs, so I'm not exactly certain where you're going with that.
Would the dog then be considered a hazard?
Yes.
Would the dog perhaps themselves be subject to the forces of justice?
Not the dog.
Again, I'm not certain where you're going with this, calling people dogs.
I have not called anyone anything.
Okay. I personally don't necessarily like violence against dogs.
Neither do I.
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, if I were to train a dog to attack people, would I be guilty of inflicting harm?
Indirectly, but it would take an intense examination of the circumstances before I would be willing to pass a guilty or non-guilty.
Sure. Let's say I was doing it maliciously, with malicious intent to cause harm. Would I then be guilty of something that resembles a crime?
I suppose it depends on if the person or entity you're intending to cause harm on is intending to cause greater harm on other individuals.
Interesting. Okay. Would you say that Lord Gideon's actions reveal an intent to protect Merc Bottom from a greater evil?
I believe Gideon was misled. I believe that Gideon at the time believed that he was doing what was best for Merc Bottom. I believe that he believed that, regardless of whether or not I believe it was actually what was best for Merc
Okay,
Bottom.
cool. Thank you.
3 minutes.
Okay. With that, I would like to call the next witness to the stand because we're running out of time. Lilith.
I want all eyes on this witness.
Hello, Lilith.
Hi.
How you doing today?
What's your questions?
Okay, first off, is your effect when you're in the stone passive or active?
That is not really something I'm aware of. My actions just, my will happens.
So your will just happens. I would say that's pretty passive then, right? That would mean that the wearer of your stone would then have to make the choice to wear the stone themselves.
Objection.
Yeah.
Sustained.
Okay. Would you like to add in?
Actual questions?
Yeah.
Demon Lilith, how were you released from your stone?
By a failed ritual.
By a failed ritual. What was the nature of that ritual?
So ritual, I believe, to try and end immortality on the Abgardia to relieve you all of the curse of having to live and die over and over again.
Are you aware of what happens to the stone as you inhabit it?
I'm aware that it was attempted to be used in the ritual and then I escaped.
Okay. Thank you.
Defense?
Sure.
I mean, I can.
We're running out of time.
You have 1 minute and 30 seconds, counsel.
Hello. Hi. So I do have a question for you. What did you receive in return for your testimony today?
Immunity from being persecuted, prosecuted, whatever you want to call it, and a favor.
Right, and who was that favor from, may I ask?
See?
You're telling me that a member of the prosecution council made a deal with you, Lilith?
Yeah.
Objection.
This was communicated in the Circle of Druids. You knew, Baron.
I just wanted to make sure that everyone knew.
Yes.
Exactly. People outside of the circle do deserve to know that. And it is relevant.
Objection. Relevance how?
Overruled. Ask a question, counsel.
In regards to your stone, it does sound like you don't have much awareness of what was happening while you were in the stone. Is that correct?
Not really. I just wanted to get out.
That desire to get out of the stone, are you aware of if that desire was perpetuated outside of what we're holding?
Probably.
Do you,
It has an effect on everyone that is near me.
would you say
in a way, your energy could be described as the cause of someone's descent into madness and tyranny. I seem to remember it happened. It's happened twice now, at least.
That is the final question and the final answer. Thank you, Lilith. You may leave the stand.
Perfect. That was
Swift,
the only
a trouble
question.
with the acre.
All right. At this time, I'd like to give Lord Gideon Sunborn the opportunity to speak on his behalf if he wishes it.
Friends, I definitely perpetrated some of the actions described here today. Some things I should certainly be held accountable for. As I said immediately after the ritual, I'm eating crow. I am humbly admitting that I was wrong. I believed that I was capable of ending immortality. I believed that I was responsible to attempt to do so. I failed, and all other actions were pursuant to that goal. I humbly submit myself before your judgment.
Thank you, Lord Gideon. Prosecution, do you have any final remarks?
You want to go or do you want to go?
I'll go. Now, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I am but a simple country healer. The charges against Gideon are great and severe. We have heard attempted arguments from the defense, but none of them have disproven the fact that he was, in fact, culpable in releasing the demon Lilith, in inciting violence in Murk Bottom, in destroying sacred creatures of Corneas, and even more charges. I ask you to judge him harshly and severely as his actions merit.
Counsel, what punishment do you seek?
What punishment do you think we should go for?
Well, there's one punishment suggested by the defense themselves, actually.
This was before I signed up.
I got nothing.
The defense wanted Gideon to be stripped of his name and named Skin Boy and run the wilds of Corneas whenever he closes his eyes.
That's not
We also have a set of punishments that can be given out.
The Baron has been
Perfect.
I have
given
been
a copy.
informed. If there are one or two specific punishments that you would also recommend to the jury, you may list them now.
One punishment I had is to personally curse Gideon myself, find out what curse would be good for the punishment according to the Baron, and we can look through the book or anywhere else to put the curse on him.
What manner of curse?
Something that would force him relatively to what Fowler was suggesting, but not strip him of his name, just something that would force him to run and live through the wilds in order for him to really connect himself to nature.
An interesting suggestion. Thank you, counsel.
my offered penance would be to serve as a class that is harmonious with Murk Bottom's prosperity. Similarly, like my counsel's offer, it would be also a reformative and restorative sentence in which Lord Gideon would be forced to perform as a class that is, say, Battery Bard or Candy Druid.
Very even-handed suggestions. Thank you, counsel. Defense, do you have any closing remarks?
Do you have anything first?
You go first, and then I will add if necessary.
So we've heard a lot of accusations and crimes thrown around here that may or may not have anything to do. I argue that my client, our Lord Gideon, was only tangentially related to most of the stuff that was argued here and brought up by our witnesses. What I heard was that our Lord Gideon found a dungeon where the adventurers of Murkbottom could seek fame and fortune for delving its depths, slaying its terrible monsters, and receiving fabulous reward. Now, was Gideon swayed by the demon Lilith in her crystal that he took on the responsibility of guarding onto himself, and perhaps hubrisly you could assume that he would be above corruption? Perhaps. But I argue that no one here is above corruption, especially from such a powerful demon. And we all hoped beyond hope that Lord Gideon would be able to persevere through his task of guarding the crystal, but failed. As to whether or not the act of stripping immortality from each of us is a crime, I would refer to the old text that we did not get to hear in court today, that if you look to the old text, they say that the act of immortality foisted upon humanity was a curse, and that it should have been stripped, and it was. Something of which we do not know restored our immortality and has thus cursed us with it again. And our Lord Corneas has worked to end this plague, perhaps through our Lord Baron, previous Baron, Gideon, and what he tried to do was a blessing on all of us. And we threw it away and forsook his kind gesture of getting rid of the curse of immortality that was put upon us by the gods.
Thank you, counsel.
Also, the enemy council, or opposing council, called the citizens of Merc Bottom dogs. Just to point that out.
My lord? My apologies for interrupting. I'm afraid my blood-bonded sister, Autumn, was unable to arrive today. However, I do carry a message of hers. I can wait until the jury convenes to discuss it, or I can present it before the full council.
I think it would be best to share that with the jury. With that, Lord Moss, do you have anything you'd like to share before the jury convenes?
The only thing I would have to add on to the very well-worded words of my co-counsel, just that there have been many, many charges levied against Lord Gideon today, and I believe most of them are completely irrelevant and easily dismissed. Anything regarding the actual delving of the dungeon, specifically in regards to killing its inhabitants, we all did. Except Gundro, Lord Gundro, apparently. We are inherently violent as a group. That's not necessarily a problem. We are just very well versed in warfare. Some things likely should be handled internally, like with the House of the Eclipse. I believe that is something more for the house than for Merkbottom to decide. And releasing the Demon Lilith, that one seems more of an inevitability than anything you could really be charged for as a crime. Did he hold a false trial? Yes. Did he bribe people? Yes, but I don't believe that's illegal. But for this multitude of crimes, I believe that we should judge fairly and not take into account the additional puffed up charges presented by the prosecution. Focus on the real issues, whatever you determine those to be.
Thank you, Lord Moss, and I must say I adore your watch.
Thank you.
Fine folk of the jury, you have 5 minutes to deliberate in private, after which I will ask you to pass a sentence by simple majority, or pass a declaration by simple majority of whether or not Lord Gideon is guilty of the crimes of which he has been accused. Let's reach the decision. Ladies, gentlemen, dwarves, and bears of the jury, do you have a member among you who will speak for you?
I shall.
Thank you, Fenric 18.
The jury finds the defendant, Lord Gideon, Esquire, etc., not guilty of the charges levied against him. on the grounds that the majority consensus is that there are no laws for him to be found guilty of breaking.
Thank you very much for your service. I find the defendant, Lord Gideon Sunborn, guilty of attempting to end the Guardian immortality cycle and innocent of all other charges. Thank you for your time, but I am also a tyrant, as it turns out. I voted Page, after all.
Do you want some classes?
Do I want some what?
Classes.
No, but I have words for you. But first, I have words
Can I take
for
this
all of us.
copy?
I have prepared a statement. Each of us here has lived a difficult lifetime. The road to reach this place is wild and untamed, and any who walk it are destined to trip upon the roots or bruise their feet upon the rocks. Our god, Cornelius, believes that this is as it should be, that struggle gives context and meaning to life. And perhaps he's right. But for each of our difficult lifetimes, Lord Gideon Sunborn has lived 100 difficult lifetimes. The name Sunborn is not a family name, nor is it a title taken in vanity. The divine spark which he used to fuel his eclipse ritual is from outside of our cosmos. It is a rogue mote of astral fire that phases its way through times and spaces, something like a stone skipping across the surface of a lake. He has lived, died, and lived again 10,000 times on 10,000 worlds. But this is a world he cannot escape. Here, caught within the gravity of Amtgardian eternal life, his stone has plunged beneath the water and fallen to rest. And I say, let it stay there. By my power as Baron of Murkbottom, in full view of gods and kin, I strip you, Lord Gideon, of the name Sunborn. And I sentence you thus. You will leave the Sunstone, smoldering in the ruins, forgotten. You will put from your mind the 10,000 worlds and invest yourself wholly in this one. Before the end of my reign, you will make pilgrimage through the broad lands of Neverwinter and pray at least 3 altars of the 14 gods. You will walk the world stripped of your divinity and be but a humble half-elf. And when you hang your head in prayer, I charge you to meditate on the nature of your half-elven kin, ever caught in the turbulence between elven ideals and human practicalities. I charge you to seek a place of balance within that turbulence and to find a new reason to fight. And when you have found a new star to follow, then you may return and reclaim the Sunstone, and with it your old name. Until that day comes, I name you Gideon Farstrider. May the name Farstrider be as a sail for your spirit. I lift from you the golden chain seal, and you may be on your way. To the rest of you, I would say this. Ponder the words of Cornelius and consider the breadth of eternity. If it is true that adversity is required for life to grow and change and transform, it follows that life eternal requires adversity that is also eternal. To that end, I sentence the demon Lilith. I charge you to take hold of the evil in this land. Gather up the vagrant shadows and the lurkers of caves. Count them and account for them. Let all wicked and monstrous things be thy domain, and let us be eternal enemies. Let us keep watch over the tides of light and dark, and let our swords never rest idle over long. I also sentence Lord Gundro Rasksfall. For your ever-turning cloak, I charge you to instruct our warriors on your underhanded tactics.
Okay.
Before the end of my reign, you will host a class at a fighter practice wherein you will discuss unconventional guards, underhanded techniques on the battlefield, and how to win a fight mentally before the first blow has been struck.
Okay.
She is not here, but I also sentenced Lokia Glenwood. I charge her to fight on a kingdom battlefield before the end of my reign, that she may know the faces and the names of the warriors whose joy she would have robbed. And I hope that their zeal for life may show her how to find joy even within the shadow of her own curse. Soren Barrow and Lord Moss the Swamp Monster made a desperate choice in a moment of passion. Taking into account that their choice was not premeditated, I will only ask them to pay a fine of 100 solari due before the end of my reign. Lord Ducky Foxbitten upheld a bond of honor, wherever he may be. Where's Duck?
Doing what Duck does best.
Yep.
Lord Ducky Foxbitten, I sentence you. You upheld a bond of honor and returned to our side when the fighting began, but for initially siding with Gideon, I charge you to pay me a fine of 3 excellent rocks before the end of my reign.
Okay.
And
that really rocks.
with that, I believe our business here is concluded. If anyone else has anything to say, let them do so now. Otherwise, let us all be on our way.
I can't believe you want more of me on the field.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.